Howdy folks, Rob here with this week's edition of Golden Rules, and we are continuing our series on how to buy a home. Now, obviously the focus of this is for first-time home buyers. Hopefully this will help demystify the process for them, but it also could be for someone who has, maybe not bought a home in 20, 30, 40 years. The process may have changed since you bought the home. So you might find this helpful as well. If you do, leave me a comment down below. I would love to hear if this helped you or helped you with the process, or maybe if your process was slightly different than what I have detailed. I would love to hear that as well. So without further ado, let's continue on. If you have been watching up to this point, and if you haven't, I recommend that you go back and you watch the other videos. We are now at the point where you have now gotten a contract agreed to. And so now what's going to happen is you're going to want to get inspections done. We're in the option period. You definitely want to get your inspections done and repairs negotiated during this option period, because you want to make sure that you have the hammer in your hands to be able to terminate the deal and walk away if you can't come to an agreement. Once you get past the option period, there's nothing that says you can't try to renegotiate, but the seller will then have the option to say, no, I'm not doing anything. And if you leave, I'm going to take your earnest money. So at that point, kind of the negotiating power switches back to the seller. So you want to make sure during this option period that you have your inspections, you negotiate repairs, and one other very important thing, you want to make sure that you line up your insurance. Make sure that you know how much it's going to cost to insure this home, because you don't want to find out that, oh, I thought it was going to be $1,000 a year for my insurance. Now I'm finding out it's going to be $2,500 a year, and that extra, $100 a month is going to mean that I can't afford my home anymore. You want to find that out during the option period, not 3 days before the contract when you could potentially lose your earnest money. So absolutely make sure that you're doing that during the option period as well. So let's talk about the inspections. There are two different types of inspectors, at least in Texas. One is what's called a TREC licensed inspector, a Texas Real Estate Commission licensed inspector, or there's also engineers. Both do effectively the same thing. Engineers are going to be a little bit more expensive. Why is that? Well, with a TREC inspector, there's a punch list basically of things that they're going to check. They'll check the roof, they'll check the plumbing, they'll check the electrical systems, they'll check all that stuff, right? And then they will give you a report on, here are the things that are functioning as intended. Here are the things that might be near the end of their usable life but are still functioning. Here are some things that are broken. Oh, by the way, here are some code changes that have happened, right? Maybe this home was built 20 years ago and there's been a code change since then, and the home complied with the code at the time it was built, but now it no longer complies with the code. These are all things that they're going to point out. Now, where an engineer could become involved is, let's say your TREC licensed inspector looks at a crack somewhere. Maybe there's a cracked tile, or there's a crack in the concrete in the garage, or something like that. And the TREC licensed inspector says, you know what, based on my judgment, I don't think that this is necessarily anything to worry about. But he can't swear to it, right? So a licensed engineer can then, they have all kinds of tools, they have all kinds of training where they can look at it and they can say, okay, based on my training, based on the measurements I've taken with my tools, your foundation is operating as intended, and therefore you have nothing to worry about. Same thing in the attic. A TREC licensed engineer could be going up there and say, ooh, I see how this bracing is. I have concerns about it, but I'm not quite sure. You might want to get that checked out. Whereas a TREC, a engineer can again look at it and say, no, based on my training, based on my expertise, here's my seal. Absolutely, this home is not going to have an issue with this bracing, or absolutely, you're going to need to get that reinforced, or you could have a sagging roof or something like that. So you can absolutely pay a little bit extra and have the engineer perform these tests for you up front and just get it all done in one shot, or you can pay a TREC licensed inspector, pay a little bit less, probably a couple $100 less, and then if an engineer becomes necessary, then you can do more tests, which are more money. So it really kind of depends. If you have a young home, something less than 20 years old, you can probably get away with a track licensed inspector. If you have a home that you're buying that's 50, 60, 70 years old, well, then you might want to look at an engineer. But regardless of who you choose, make sure that it's somebody that you know is competent in the industry, someone that's licensed. This is not the time to be pulling out your dad. This is not the time, unless he happens to be a licensed inspector or an engineer. This is not the time to bring out Cousin Eddie or Uncle Bob to come digging out in the crawl space underneath the house. Absolutely make sure you have somebody that is professional, that knows what they're doing, so you can get a competent report. Now, when you do get this report back, what I would say is it's time to negotiate repairs. And again, you want to get this done before the end of your option period. If you're dealing with a resale home, a home that someone's been living in, be reasonable, okay? You're not buying a perfect home. There will be things that your seller has lived with that, are minor, and it's really not fair. If we're talking about painting some fascia board somewhere or replacing some rotted wood, something like that, you probably should just go ahead and, obviously it depends on the market conditions as to how much you can get away with. But if you ask for too much, you may upset your seller and he says no to everything. And now you're put in a dilemma where you either have to agree to no repairs or I have to walk away from the deal. And maybe you're okay with that, but just, take that in consideration when you are doing your repair ask. Your realtor will be a resource at this point in time to say what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, what is market, what is not market, those kinds of things. If you're dealing with a new home construction, well, that's really the time when you can simply hand the builder the inspection report and say, okay, fix it. Now, it's not to say that they will fix everything. There could be some things that, are oversights by the contractor, and they absolutely will take care of those things. Or if something's a code violation, they absolutely will take care of those things as well. But there could be some things that are the opinion of the inspector. Something like, I think that this home should have gutters all the way around the house. Well, that may or may not be the construction standard of the builder, okay? And they might not, or they probably will, refuse to do those things. So keep those things in mind. Usually they will address most, if not all, of the things on an inspection report. It is a new home after all. But there could be some things that they push back on or refuse to do. And the other thing I will tell you is, even if you are buying a new home, absolutely get a home inspection. I can tell you that even though it is new, it is not perfect. And I have heard of situations where homes have been built and they've been built on a faulty foundation and they've had to be torn down. And, to the credit of the builder, they actually absolutely put that family in rental housing and took care of them while they were going through this whole rebuild process. But they had to go through the whole rebuild process after moving into the home and having the things in storage, and just a huge headache and mess. So absolutely have a home inspected, even if it's a brand new home. Hopefully this is helpful, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.